Good evening. I would like to welcome you to this online event, Literature Meets Artificial Intelligence. My name is Sabine Kreuzenbrunner. I'm the director of the Austrian Cultural Forum. I arrived in September here, so it's a pleasure for me to meet you here via online and also in this very interesting and hopefully inspiring event. It's a project presentation. The project is part of the International Literature Dialogues, an initiative of the Department for International Cultural Relations at the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the Austrian Society for Literature, die Österreichische Gesellschaft für Literatur. And this project is here to support establishing international literary cooperation projects. So today's project presentation serves two purposes, thanks to the very active initiator, Mr. Ballhausen, and of course, the writers whom I'm going to introduce in a minute. So the two purposes are basically, first of all, to explore artificial intelligence from a literary perspective, and to shed, hopefully, and probably light on the extent to which artificial intelligence has been a topic in contemporary literature, but also has been a catalyst tool for literary production itself. Literature has always reflected and anticipated change, including technological challenges and their transformative power. Be it of the individual as well as a social collective, the power of and for rulers and the ruled, and of the relationship of both within a political and economic order. Especially, we see this, of course, in a very challenging way in how this might influence political orders, democracy, ways and means to express ourselves, etc. So the second purpose of this project and project presentation is, of course, to present the results of a dialogue between Austrian and Egyptian writers that have been working together in online lab sessions for the past month, and to encourage a continuous exchange in the future. Ms. Daniela Chana, or I hope I expressed this, I pronounced this correctly, Judith Nika Pfeifer and Ahmed Awny will allow insights today into their writing processes and will share new texts. The project's initiator is Mr. Thomas Ballhausen, who will moderate the event and explain the larger context of this endeavor. Mr. Ballhausen is an Austrian writer, literary scholar, and senior artist at University Mozarteum, Salzburg. He studied comparative literature, German philosophy, and language arts, with research interests that includes comparative media history, critical heritage studies, and literature, and of course, in this context, artistic research. So to come to the three writers we host today, or that are hosted today, Daniela Chana, an author based in Vienna. She has written short stories and poems, and her anthology, 9 seltsame Frauen, 9 strange women, so to speak, was shortlisted for the Austrian Book Prize 2021. So congratulations. The second writer is Ms. Judith Nika Pfeifer, again an Austrian writer and transmedial artist. She lives in Vienna and also Berlin, writes lyric, prose, scenic, and radiophonic texts, and published and has already published a number of poems and also a tale called Violante. She participated in the Austrian American Arts Incubator Exchange Program at MIT with an artificial intelligence focus. Last but not least, Ahmed Awny from Egypt, but currently in Berlin, as we heard. He's born in 1988 lives mainly in Cairo and writes and publishes short stories and novels in Arabic and English. And his debut novel, Heroes, won the Sawiris Prize for Novel by Emerging Writers in 2020. Also, congratulations. The initiator of this project, Mr. Ballhausen, I've already introduced, and he actually will moderate this presentation. Therefore, I now hand over and give the floor to Thomas Ballhausen and the writers from Egypt and Austria. And I hope you will enjoy the project, the continuous project, this presentation and this evening. And I also hope that this dialogue can be sustained through your collective efforts. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, and thank you all for participating in this online presentation. This event is very, very important for me and also to the writers involved in our project, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the larger context of our project before we move on to the artist statements and presentations of tonight's event. And I would share my screen now and go to my presentation to give you a better overview of what we have done and what we are going to do in our project. I hope everybody can see my presentation. Maybe Daniela, you can nod or give me a thumbs up. That would be really nice. Great. So the title of our project is Literature Meets Artificial Intelligence, an Austrian-Egyptian Dialogue, and I will walk you through the main points and the larger context of our project. So a first overview, what do we have in mind for tonight's event? First, there will be this short presentation. I will explain a couple of things about the actual framework. We already heard in the introduction a couple of things about that. I will speak a little to the topic of the combination or the connection between literature and artificial intelligence, and what led me to choose this topic in my application and inviting the writers that participated in the project. That also laps to onto the next point. So who are the partners that are involved in this project? What happened so far and what are our next steps? But don't be alarmed, I will not take a lot of time. Then we move on to the artists' talks and statements in this order. Daniela will start, then we will hear from Ahmed, then from Judith, and then we will actually very soon also involve you, the audience, to participate in this presentation, ask your questions, participate in this exchange of having a look and, let's say, open the lid of the black box to peek inside of the artistic process of contemporary writers. So talking about the framework, as you already heard, the project was conducted under the framework of the Internationale Literaturdialoge, the International Dialogues for Literature, a program that was hosted by the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. The application process happened in the first half of 2021. There was a variety of topics that could be addressed, but artificial intelligence stood out, especially to me and my background in comparative literature. In the end, more than 50 applications were handed in. In the end, 16 projects really got funded by the ministry. Others received smaller amounts to at least conduct some of the things they had in mind, but 16 projects out of 50 is really an impressive number. And I think really shows that there is an interest in what literature has to offer today, what it can also offer not only within the discourse of literature, but also for society in general. And literature meets artificial intelligence is, of course, one of these 16 projects. I'm really happy that we got this funding and our application was successful. Thank you to everybody involved, also to the esteemed colleagues in Cairo that helped a lot with all their wisdom and wit and a lot of jokes, I have to admit. That was something that was very well appreciated. And I have to add that Literature Meets Artificial Intelligence is a bilateral project between Austria and Egypt, and a project that on purpose picked a country from the Arab states. And I'm really happy because this is that we got funded, because this is a connection that's especially also personally very, very important to me. So why artificial intelligence? For one, of course, it fits the topics that were mentioned in the call. So there were some constraints, some guidelines we needed to take into account. And what I want to point out is that artificial intelligence is a crucial part of our everyday life, even if we don't know that or notice it all the time. For literature, artificial intelligence is something that is strongly visible in all aspects of the literary ecosystem and all related media, which means artificial intelligence influences all aspects of literature, from the production to the distribution to the actual process of reception of literature. Artificial intelligence is also a well-established topic within the field of literature and all related media. That also means the history of literature. So literature has always written about artificial intelligence, has always reflected upon technical possibilities and endeavors, and also coined some key vocabulary that is deeply connected with artificial intelligence, also in scientific contexts. Artificial intelligence is also a well-researched topic, yes, but it's still possible to do something new, something exciting, and that was also very important for me to picking specifically that topic. When it comes to literature, an additional aspect that spoke to me, or that made it for me so interesting to pick artificial intelligence as a topic, was that literature in regard to artificial intelligence is both a means of reflection, but it's also an object of the research itself, the artistic research even. And I think that's a twofold concept that really spoke to me, and that also made it so interesting to pick especially that topic. And as I mentioned before, it is a possibility to, or something that I wanted to do with that project, among many other things, was to open up the black box of the creative process. So really made it possible to say, okay, how do we write today, especially about a topic that is so close to us, to our everyday life, to our experiences as writers, as readers, as citizens, as we heard, and to open up that process, intertwine it, and the writing process can be something pretty solitary sometimes, and lonesome even. And I wanted to put writers into context, especially in this bilateral context, to make them aware that they are maybe asking similar questions and addressing them in similar ways, and to open up this floor, so to speak, within the project to make that dialogue possible. So such a project cannot happen without partners. 3 Austrian writers participated in the project and 3 Egyptian writers. And I'm very pleased to say that all the writers that I had on my wish list agreed very freely and pretty quick to the idea to participate in this very exciting endeavor. And we also had some institutional partners that helped along the way. One is the research management of the University Mozarteum Salzburg, that will also play a big part in some next steps we have in mind for this group that were used to work together in the core phase of the project, and also the publisher Edition Atelier in Vienna that will publish a book together with us as one of the future outcomes of this project. So, and as you already heard tonight, we have 3 of the 6 writers with us, and I'm really pleased that they will participate and will give us the opportunity to talk about their work as writers, to really have a peek in their artistic process, especially when it comes to the connections between literature and artificial intelligence, and how our dialogue and everything we conducted within the framework of the project in a way influenced what they did and what they are still doing. So what happened so far? The core phase of the project took place in July to October 2021. We conducted 4 online labs, 3 hours each, a very intense process of dialogue and exchange of material, of reading text fragments to each other, of discussing certain angles, discussing different approaches towards the topic. It was a very fruitful and a very lively conversation that was happening here. And it was always a pleasure to moderate that process. We made use of innovative mapping technologies, and I'm very happy that Judith brought in some very, very good ideas here. So we had a possibility to really collect also and document our process and react, as I said, collect all the items and concepts and titles that were mentioned during our online labs. And that helped in carving out more interesting research questions, shaping the ideas, keeping them bouncing back and forth between us. That's something that, of course, also happened in a lot of variety of means connected with e-communication. And I'm pleased to say that there's already a lot of dissemination and science outreach work that was going on. We had a number of articles reporting about our project. I could present it from time to time, also, let's say, at the Sigmund Freud University here in Vienna and at some other places. So there was really a lot of interest in what we are doing with this bilateral dialogue. And everybody was very, very thrilled about the possibility that there was an ongoing dialogue between contemporary writers from Austria and Egypt addressing a topic that is in a way so dear and so close to us all. What are our next steps? Although the core phase is already closed, there will be follow-up activities concerning the project and its future outcomes. One will be the participating in the so-called Lange Nacht der Forschung, the long night of science and research, a national endeavor that takes place here in Austria by the end of May. And we will present part of our findings and fragments from the texts produced at the University Mozarteum Salzburg. There will be a bilingual book, German and Arabic, will be published in the fall 2021 with the already mentioned publisher Edition Atelier in Vienna. And there will be further dissemination activities. There are already new invitations coming along and telling us, okay, we should continue with our interesting work. We should continue with the dialogue and also report about that to the open public. And I think that's therefore I put it in really, really big letters, because the best result for me as a project manager here in this and moderator of that project, and it made me so very, very happy, is that the best result is that we established an ongoing dialogue and a very productive exchange between Austrian and Egyptian writers, and something that is already continuing, like tonight, after the end of the core phase of the project, because the project closed in the end of November, and I'm thrilled and I'm very keen to continue with that. And that makes me, yeah, really, really happy that we can continue to do so. And now we come to the artist statements, and I can give the floor to Daniela, Ahmed, and Judith. I proposed 3 key questions to them as starting points to give you, the esteemed audience, a better insight in who they are, what their writing process looks like, and how they approach the topic of the project. That will be the starting point of tonight's event. And thank you so much. And I will give the floor now to Daniela. Thank you.
So, hello, do you hear me? Is it? Okay, fine. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas, for your introduction, and of course for organizing this amazing project. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to participate in this, and I really want to mention before that I really enjoyed all of our online meetings and discussions that we already had before in our group. I think I learned a lot about this topic, which is a very, very important topic nowadays. And yeah, and I'm really excited to listen to all of you, and also to read your texts and those of the other participants in the book that will be published. So I think it's really interesting to see that we are all writers, but every one of us has a completely different approach to that topic. So now to the questions. First, about myself as a writer. Actually, I'm writing all kinds of texts, poems, short stories, newspaper essays, also book reviews, and also some research on poetry and pop music and connected topics. In 2018, my first book of poems was published, Sagt die Dame is the German title. And last year I published a collection of short stories that was already mentioned. And both books mostly deal with topics from everyday life, I would say, like the small problems and dramas that most people experience in their daily lives. So it's a lot about friendship and love and family relations, and of course, usually from a female perspective. And I'm currently working on a novel. So about my writing process actually is completely different in this project than it usually is. Because usually it depends on the kind of text that I'm working on. So when writing poetry, usually I don't need a desk. I can write poetry everywhere and at all times, just with pencil and paper. And usually when I'm writing prose or newspaper essays or anything, I need to be at my desk and really focus on my work, and like in an office with coffee breaks in the middle and all that kind of stuff. So it really feels like hard work. But this time at this project, it's quite completely different, because my work on this project requires a lot more of research than usually. Over the last year, I've been reading a lot about artificial intelligence and about different aspects of the topic, as I will explain later. So it feels almost like scientific research, which is quite funny to do so much research for writing a short story, actually, because this is what I'm going to contribute in the book. So it's probably going to be one of the most elaborated short stories that I've ever written. So it's a completely new working process for me at this project, which is also very exciting. And now the most interesting part, how I approach AI. When I was asked to participate in this project, I was very curious, and then I started to do a lot of research. And I'm certainly not an expert on technological issues. So it was clear to me that in this project, I would not be the one who focuses on technical aspects of AI. But I'm very interested in two other aspects. So in my contribution to this project, I'm focusing on these. The first is human relationships and what it means to be human. I think there are some very interesting questions connected with these technologies. For instance, how are human relationships and the human challenged by artificial intelligence? And is there anything that gets lost when these new technologies are contributing more and more to our daily lives? Or is there probably also something that is gained? And what actually makes human relationships? How can you define human, and what is so special about it and so unique? And then on the opposite, can there be anything human in the artificial? And probably, what do we learn about ourselves as human beings through the experience with artificial intelligence? So for the short story that I'm going to contribute to this book, of course, I don't want to share too much about it now. I mean, I don't want to spoil you, but I'm going to focus mostly on those questions about the human. And there certainly are some human qualities that are hard to achieve by artificial intelligence, so such as critical thinking or reason. Yeah, and of course, what about emotions? And artificial intelligence probably might be able to copy certain expressions of emotions, I think, or pretend to feel something. But can that ever be enough? And could this have an impact also on the way we ourselves perceive and express emotions in the future? And will relationships be changing? And also the approach to language or communication is different. Of course, a machine is communicating and learning via codes, while human beings are using language. And so what is so special about language? What is special about the language of a human being if you compare it to a code? So several scholars have already written about this. For instance, in their book, Prinzip Mensch, Paul Nemitz and Matthias Pfeffer point out that codes are made for machines which lack the ability for critical thinking, while human beings use language and are able to reflect about and question what they hear and read. And that seems to be a big difference. And probably it's also a big difference in terms of human relationships. So it seems obvious that there must be something that gets lost, like probably a certain sense of humor or double meanings and so on, probably poetry also. And as a writer, it's especially interesting to reflect on what is so unique about human language, and especially in terms of relationships. Yeah, and the second aspect that I'm very interested in is the legal aspect. Over the last year, I read a lot about this as well. Several books and articles that were dealing with questions of regulation of these technologies. And as you probably know, lately there have been some discussions and also some steps towards more regulation of AI in the European Union. So in April 2021, the European Commission presented a proposal for a regulation laying down harmonized rules on AI, which is also called the Artificial Intelligence Act. And in this act, the focus lies on the risks of these technologies and the liability and responsibility for possible damages that might occur. So it's a risk-based approach. And I think it will be interesting to see the developments of this in the future. Yeah, at this point now, I'm not able to tell you in detail how this legal aspect is going to find its way into my short story. I think my text will rather be about the philosophical questions that are connected with it, but it shows how big and important and broadly discussed this topic is at the moment. So since there are those developments going on, so this discussion is really vivid. Yeah, and as you probably noticed, I haven't found all the answers to my questions yet. So I'm still doing my research and still working on my short story for the book. But this was just to give you a short overview about the questions on my mind. And yeah, now I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and to listen about your approaches. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniela, for this wonderful insight into your process and also letting the audience know who you are as a writer. Before we move on to Ahmed, I want to point out that research sometimes leads us almost naturally to more questions and not always to answers that already solve everything, so to speak. So sometimes a new question can also be a very interesting result, so to speak. And just a quick question. You talked a lot about liability, about loss, possible damages, something that might get lost in translation, so to speak. I'm wondering, can you give us an example of something we might gain from the connection between artificial intelligence and literature?
Well, that was also one of the questions that emerged. So I don't have the answer to this yet. But one thing that I was thinking about was that probably through our experience with artificial intelligence, it might be that we discover the or learn to appreciate more what it means to be human, and also what it means to have this human language, which is of course very, I mean, there can be a lot of mistakes and misunderstandings and so on, but there's also poetry possible. I don't know how much poetry is possible with artificial intelligence. I mean, of course, there are these projects, I know them as well, but yeah, probably we can discuss this as well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but perhaps I just try to be optimistic. I don't want to say, oh, everything is so bad and the developments are so bad. I just try to see some positive things about it. So I thought probably we discover also some good aspects about being human, if in comparison to artificial intelligence or something.
Okay, thank you so much for now, and I hand over to Ahmed. We're thrilled to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Thomas and Daniela, and thank you all for having me in this project. So I'm Ahmed. I'll briefly say what I'm doing. I mainly write stories in different forms, in short stories and in a novel form. And currently I'm writing non-fiction stories. This is my project, my new project. And I will combine the other two questions together, because actually the way I worked or I'm working on the project is my approach. Because I started working while knowing that I was never a good reader or follower for the artificial intelligence related literature. And I was curious why. That's why I was intrigued to join the dialogue. And being a dialogue was interesting for me because I thought the topic is really different if you are in Egypt or in Austria or in the US. It's a universal topic, but had a real local context. And when I started doing my research, the first thing I did is Googling AI and Egypt. And I found out that at that time, the Egyptian authorities detained the first female robot in the airport because the robot was a painter, came to Cairo to join the exhibition beside the pyramids or whatever, and then they detained it because she has a camera on her eyes, so they thought she might be a spy. So that was interesting to imagine how would you investigate a robot of being a spy and that stuff. But this was not the question for me. It raised the question that why Arabic literature does not have that interest in AI topic as much as we have it in other literature. And I felt it's mainly about that in some countries, mainly the democratic countries or the countries that reached a democratic level, that the authority is mainly invisible, that now people, writers and readers feel that the AI is the new system, the AI is the one they should be afraid of, or they should be the one controlling them through Facebook and other stuff. While in another contexts like Egypt, we still have the classic system of ruling. So we don't care that much if Facebook is spying on us, because it's not a threat, because we actually use Facebook to talk freely from out of the system. But then I wanted to skip all this part because I don't want to talk about only the local context. And I started to explore the idea of artificial intelligence and literature. The first thing I got in my head is that, of course, some jobs will be replaceable by artificial intelligence. I was moving to Berlin then, and Berlin is famous of the nightlife and clubs, and they have this bouncers who have a very unique way of selecting people who gets in and who gets out. So I thought, okay, I will write a story about a club that replaced bouncers by a written code. And the story is about the guy who wrote the code, and he's failing to get in because he's always refused to. He's just checking what's wrong with the code. Okay, so that was the first idea. But with extra research, I got more introduced to artificial intelligence and literature itself, the topic itself. And I was surprised that the question of can bots write literature is not an imaginary one anymore. It actually exists and published. We have books now published written by bots. And that was terrifying for me as a writer, because I was thinking that bouncers would be replaced, but now I'm thinking writers would be replaced too. So I felt threatened a bit. And I felt the topic is turning to me in my head to be artificial intelligence versus literature, not and literature, as if it's kind of competition. So I think this led to the story I'm currently writing, in which my protagonist is a human writer dealing with a bot editor who's making edits on his novel after all the human editors were fired by the publishing house. So it's mainly a dialogue between a human writer and a bot editor about a novel, about a project. And I think through this story, and through the project, I want to take the chance to explore what I really mean when I use the word literature, how it's different from the stories we share in our daily lives, what is to be published and what's not, what's literature and what's the story. And also, how can literature change if written by artificial intelligence? So currently I'm writing this story, and I'm having a mesh of thoughts that I would share some with you, that I think, I think AI can write the perfect story. That would be the simple answer, because if the human writer is relying on his or her memory and imagination to write, we're talking about a bot that can have an endless storage of amounts of incidents and characters that can create millions of stories possibilities. So yeah, the bots can create for sure a full story. However, I'm asking myself if literature is about having as much incidents, a full story to tell in details, or it's mainly about your perspective while telling the story and how you feel about it. And of course, this is a human thing so far, until bots can have empathy and emotional intelligence. Also, if bots can be better in writing a full complete story with all the plots perfectly in place and all the characters have all the layers needed, one should ask, is this of a great value to literature? Because I mean, is a good novel necessarily tells a complete story? And I imagine, the example I had in my head is Albert Camus' novel, The Stranger. And since it started with the narrator's indifference towards his mother's death, I imagine if the bot is the writer, it would think that it is necessary to tell us everything about his mother, everything about his relationship with her. And for me, this would have killed the story, because in fact, I think storytelling's magic is about what you pick to hide from the story, not only what you tell. And this criteria is really sensitive, and it's uncalculated. So still the untold part is what makes it engaging and valuable. So this is also a challenge. However, I believe this might happen because, yeah, when we talk about technology, our present is the past sci-fi. So it can happen at some moment because machine learning is also developing in a very fast pace. And I guess at some point it will match human writers' talent. And why I believe in this? Because from the literature itself, because of course every writer feels he lives or she lives a unique experience and have unique feelings and ideas to write about. But in fact, if what they have is that unique, no reader will react with it because it will not touch anyone, because no one will relate to if it's only one of a kind thing. Literature lives for ages and passes through cultures, because whatever the writer felt unique about, others felt it as well while reading, and they created together a common sense, or what we call it the collective conscious. And this conscious, of course, can be studied in patterns, and when encoded in a software bot, it might really lead to something expressive and humane-like. Because it's mainly coming from the humans, not from the machine. So I guess I'm trying to explore this idea through the dialogue between this human writer and the bot editor, who are trying to reach a common ground so they can finalize the novel they are working on. So basically, that's what I'm writing at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ahmed, for showing us how your writing process works. And we especially had a lot of discussions during our online labs about this idea of inclusion and exclusion. And I totally enjoy this moving from the bouncer to the editor. I think it's not that far-fetched. I really like that. And we mustn't forget that, as you also pointed out, there's in the different strands of world literature, the idea of artificial intelligence was always dealt with in very, very different ways. And we have a lot of literature dealing with these topics, and not only genre literature, but also a lot of highbrow literature, so to speak. And I think that's something really, I want to stress your point here. That's really, really interesting. And that was also something that informed our discussions during the core phase of the project. And on the other hand, as you said, how is machine learning, a really key term you mentioned here, how is that informing us on one hand, and on the other hand, maybe opens up a trap because of mimic concept, so to speak, something that leads us back to the idea of how do we as writers engage with such a loaded topic, so to speak, and therefore asks us and to not forget about aesthetic concepts here as well. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much. And looking at the time, I would hand over to Judith, and we're looking forward to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, hello. It's already wonderful to listen to you all and hear how your projects have evolved. Yeah, thank you so much for putting us together, Thomas, and connecting us, and good evening also from my part. It's a great pleasure to be here listening to you, and I'm really excited to be part of this and talk about this super interesting topic, and to see how we can further tackle this together and what comes out. Before talking about my approach to AI and literature, let me briefly introduce myself. I am a multidisciplinary artist working across literature, sound, video, performance, and installation. People often say that my handling of language, be it in my poems, my prose, my radio and video works, is a playful and multi-layered one. What I'm interested in is trying not only to describe with words, but bringing something together and making it tangible through words, and bringing together seemingly incompatible things. I really like to work in collaborative projects with others like this one here. So let me show you some pictures of a recent work I did. All right. So this was from, can you see the lemon, everybody? Okay. This was from an exhibition in last summer. It was called What's the Time? So time was an ingredient, a very important ingredient in this exhibition. And it was curated by Sune Gensma. It took place at the Flug in Vienna. And we were 4 or 5 artists, Maria Handel, Sune Gensma was the curator, then Friederike Mayröcker had a poem shown, and she had passed away already, but a poem of hers was published there. And Guadalupe Adrete was one of the artists, and Edith Paya and me. So this was a co-op work between Edith and myself. What we did is, as I already said, time was an ingredient. We tattooed fruit. So this was a lemon. We had different kinds of fruit. Here you can see a melon, a cucumber, a sweet potato, and I think it's a regular potato. Then here we have pumpkin and butternut squash. So what we did is we took poems and texts that I wrote for the vegetables, and Edith's part was she tattooed it on the vegetables and fruit. And here this is a still life. I think, can I put it down? So as you can see, what happened at the Flug is that people told us that these vegetable and fruit became beings in a way, non-human beings, certainly not artificial beings, but they kind of were talking to us as an audience. And it was a really nice project. This is just to show you one of my most recent works. So I'm gonna stop the share right now. And yes. And so this was Flug, and it was called Decomposizione di Poesia. And as you could see, as we experienced that some fruit deteriorated faster than others. As an artist, I'm really interested in the unexpected, in the reversal of observations. I'm fascinated how everything is linked together. And one of my most recent publications also is Flugschrift. It's in English and curated by Dieter Sperl. Would you like to see this as well? Then I can maybe share this with you. Let me see. Share screen. Yeah, my desktop. A bit full. Yes. Okay, it's quite crowded right now. Maybe I can, pump it up a bit. Yes. So it's kind of reversed also here. You can download it on the website. It's called flugschrift.at. It's in English, and I draw like this single drawings that I used, and I wrote poems for it and text, and it's about time and space as well in a way. So I'm gonna stop share this. This is just to show you, to give you a quick overview of. So have I stopped sharing my screen?
Yes, and maybe you feel like moving on to the tackling of the topic of artificial intelligence?
Yes. Okay, so with artificial intelligence, what I do is I try to find a poetic perspective in everything I tackle, because I try to find a sense of wonder, humor, and a playful attitude towards it. And I did some research. I had Janet Winterson's book 12 Bytes here, if you can see it. Basically, it's this topic of history repeats itself, but just in different discourses, different ways. We have this fear-based approach that robots, artificial intelligence would take over our jobs or would replace us. So that you have this fear-based approach. You have the approach that AI, how to say, that AI's impact on our social societies is a racist one, which is of course true because it's human programmed, it's programmed by humans. And what interested me above all this is the questions: why are we so obsessed by this fear-based approach? Why are we fearing that we are getting replaced by others? So at the beginning, there's usually an idea and this topic that triggers something. It can be a word, a quote, or research, something that interests me. And then I try to really look at it from a very different angle and perspective. So I did this with this too, with this topic too. And to recombine and combine the bits and pieces into something new that of course is not new because it's been there already. And this happens mostly unconsciously. And but I really believe that we already synthesizes, and that's how our brains are wired. And so my approach, and I don't want to spoil this, but I'd rather leave it up for you to read. But I mean, I could say the basic idea is what if not we invented artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence would have invented us. So this is kind of this reverse start that I'm taking, and I'm trying to see where it leads me. So one could sum it up as a discovery adventure journey for interestingness. I'm looking at the form, what form could this short story take, and then it's about connecting the dots in a way that things I find about from other readers and artists and readers like you, or reflections that we had, to go on and put it into a different form and try to find a new approach from there. So yes, and then hopefully find something very miraculous that comes out of it, and add something new to this topic of literature and AI. So this would be the output, my short story, and I'm looking forward to discussing more about this. And yes, and I also have a lot of questions like how can AI become a tool for us as writers? Would AI read the stories that we read the same way we do? Would it use a similar creative process and make similar artistic decisions? Or it's something that leads to new questions as well. And I'm trying to find a way how to fill the form and get this new reversal of the story in a proper short story. So that's my process for now. Yes.
Cool. Thank you so much, Judith. Once again, your approach is turning the tables, and you'll talk about reversing processes. And I think what you just mentioned and how your story might look like, once again, is showing that this is a poetic principle you are keen to pursue further. And that was something that was also very valuable to us during our online labs. I think always to have this certain on purpose to have a different perspective on things. And I like that also the beautiful images you showed, your other works. and that how we move from, let's say, from objects to things, and how we can consider them as agents in our environments and regard them as things and not just as objects we use, but as things that have a certain agency, even that is influencing the way we deal with our everyday life, the way we write, even. I really like this playful idea, and maybe this is a good starting point to kick off our discussion. Maybe to the three of you, I have the feeling that a lot of things we discussed during our online labs and all the things that how we influenced each other also always came back to this idea of what is not only what do we have in common, but what is the common? What is the community here? Or in legal terms, what is the contract, so to speak, between us, between humans, writers, for instance, but also how do we interact with the machinery and the software that is there, and that the humans are not just the glitch there, the wetware that is making everything difficult. And although maybe that might even be the best thing that can happen. As Ahmed said, I think that we need to be aware of malfunctions, so to speak, of gaps, of something that is not intended, so to speak, and that might be the best thing that can happen. And I think the unintended or the unknown, so to speak, something that is of interest to us, but we don't even know yet that we don't know it. Yeah, that is something we thrive for, and maybe we can really kickstart the discussion about this idea of this idea of community, the community of writers, and maybe the community of machines. Maybe you have some thoughts on that, and once again, maybe we can do it like Daniela, Ahmed, Judith, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, well, I think the question of what we have in common or what the community and the contract can be is something that I already had on my mind. And when I was talking about human relationships and emotions and these things, I think to me, this is one of the really big things that distinguish us from machines, I hope. and I hope this will also be like this in the future. So actually that one of the reasons why I'm kind of skeptical when it comes to AI produced poetry is that I really think that poetry has to contain and come from real emotion and from human-based feelings and experiences. So yeah, to me, certainly it's the emotional thing that we have, yeah, that's kind of makes us a community.
Yeah, and just to add an example from what is happening already and what is out there when it comes to literature and artificial intelligence, especially when we think about poetry, there's this Chinese project out there, and it's not experience-based, it's image-based. So they feed images into the AI, and out of 10,000 poems that AI produced, they took 100 and considered them poetry. I think they put it even in a book, which is a really nice idea. But to give you and also the audience, to give you an estimate, there's nothing that is experience-based, but it's image-based, then translate that into semantic context, so to speak. But out of 10,000 poems, only 100 were considered by a human editor, in that case, poetry. And I think that's really an interesting thing. But we do have predictions that in 2050, the first AI bestseller will be published, and it will be a literary bestseller and not a scholarly book. And I think that's interesting and something we need to further investigate, so to speak, also in our artistic endeavors. But isn't
there really amazing thing about poetry, that when reading it, you have the feeling that somebody out there felt this, and somebody out there probably made the same experience that you made, or whatever, or a completely different experience. And for this, it is interesting to read it. So this is something that artificial intelligence would never be able to achieve.
I agree when it comes to the emotional extreme that is there in the density of poetry. And one mustn't forget that in the end, the text is always so much cleverer than the writer itself. And I think that's something still true. And maybe so that the machine produced text will always be also smarter than the machine. I would hope so, at least. But let's move on to Ahmed. What are your thoughts on that matter? Thank you, Daniela.
Yeah, I think we should ask this question when robots start writing about robots, because it's when we look for a community when there is another community. But so far, even poems or stories written by artificial intelligence, it's written by humans, because it's like the Industrial Revolution. We used to do a lot of things with our hands, and then we learned how to make a machine that do this for us. Okay, this means we're doing it as well, because we created this machine. We know how to put the material in it. We know how to make the design for whatever we want, and the machine just only do some work. So I think, okay, how can the artificial intelligence write story? It should take a lot of inputs, and inputs come from the human beings. So it's a different kind of writing. It's like instead of you writing the whole story, you dig in some inputs and let the machine do some random variations, creating the story. So it's a different kind of writing, but it's still, I cannot see it as if it's not if it's not with human interference. It's still mainly monitored by human writers, because they tailor the inputs, they write the code of how the machine will match the words or match the characters. So it's mainly, I think we're talking till now about a new way of writing, but it's still writing by humans. It's not that it's writing by machines, because machines cannot write without human input. So the start is always from the humans. So I don't see it like our community versus the machine community when it comes to writing. Or maybe I'm sure it would happen in 100 years or maybe less, of course less, when the machines can recreate these inputs and create another stories from the same stories they created. But this is, I'm still not, I don't have this kind of imagination till now, so I cannot discuss.
Yeah, you're right. It's absolutely, of course, it's a little dangerous to predict the future, especially as writers. But just a quick follow-up comment and question. I think that we mustn't forget that what we are doing here, and I really like what you say about the human input, so to speak, and the human framing of what is going to happen, but it's also coding to include randomness. And that's something that we can predict only up to a certain point, so to speak. And to give also the audience an example of where humans enabled the machine to come up with a new book or a new text, so to speak, is something that is done by a big academic publishing house. And they fed an artificial intelligence text generator scientific scholarly papers about lithium batteries. I think there's a lot of irony there, I think, to provide an AI text generator with text about telling you something about lithium batteries. And in the end, the AI produced a completely new book, like a scholarly monograph based on a couple of hundred scholarly papers. So an artificial intelligence generated book about batteries. Yeah. And I think maybe there's some irony there, some intended irony there, but I really like the idea that this is a first step of a real world approach, let's say, how artificial intelligence is influencing the way texts are produced, how they are scanned and reproduced, especially if they are clustered and structured in a certain way. And that's also true for legal scholarly papers. No? In legal studies, that's something that is happening there as well. But it doesn't stop at the production. It also goes into the distribution and selection criteria and selection processes, what we find on our news feed. So this is something that is already happening. And therefore, I especially like your answer and your comment. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Judith, your thoughts on the matter of the common and the community, something that is very close to all your projects, I'm willing to say, when I think about it, and I really like a lot of the things you do. So yeah, that the community, the common, that is something that is always very close to home, so to speak.
Yeah. It's so interesting what you all are putting out here. So evolving from the question, can there be a truly creative machine? I maybe like to pick up the thread and reframe it. Might artificial intelligence be non-human and creative? And what could we learn about our own consciousness or our own community or communal living if we were to answer the second question with maybe it could be possible to have artificial intelligence that is non-human and creative, or even if we answered with a yes. So this was also brought up by Elvira Wilk in The Atlantic, and I found it really fascinating to get into a different mindset and say, okay, how can we maybe have other beings that are creative next to ourselves? So I really find this super interesting and very exciting.
So it is my pleasure and my duty to thank you all for participating in tonight's event, participating also in our ongoing dialogue. I hope you find it interesting, at least as interesting as we. And we learned a lot, I think, also as writers tonight. Thank you, everybody, for the questions and the very good comments. Again, thank you, Daniela, Judith, and Ahmed for participating tonight and also in the coming steps of the project. And I would give back to the people of the Austrian Cultural Forum Cairo. Big thank you again for making this possible for us. This was really brilliant to present our preliminary findings. And yeah, as I said, open the lid of the black box of how writing is done today, especially when dealing with contemporary challenges and topics like artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.